Jimmy Kimmel has been giving us some much-needed laughs throughout this insane pandemic, and he just started doing it back in the studio again. Please welcome back Jimmy Kimmel. What's up, Jay? What's happening?
Hi,
you look
how
good.
are you?
You sound
Hi,
good.
guys. What's happening?
Cool.
Hi, Jimmy.
What's it like being back in the studio?
It's weird. It's like doing a show in an abandoned hospital. You know, you walk through the door and there are people wearing PPE and there's plexiglass everywhere. I have a theory that this virus was started by the plexiglass industry to sell more product.
I like it. Anna.
Jimmy, you hosted the Emmys a few weeks ago from an empty studio. All the nominees were at home. You were talking to an empty studio. I'm very good friends. One of my close friends is George Lopez. He filled in for you earlier in the summer. He was telling me how weird it is not to have an audience because, you know, you don't have an applause. You don't have feedback. How do you get your timing right? So what was that night like for you hosting the Emmys with nobody there?
You know, it's like, that's interesting that George said that. It's like kind of like if you ate dinner with no food, like you sat there with a plate and a fork and a knife and went through the motions of eating, but got none of the pleasure that you typically would get. I mean, you want an audience there. And we had a big crew. We did the show in the Staples Center, which is a huge venue and not exactly ideal for comedy, especially when it's empty. And it was very strange. Ultimately, I think it somehow miraculously worked. I don't know how it happened, but everyone seemed to like it afterwards. And people said, oh, that was better. And it didn't feel better on my end. It felt like doing jokes to almost complete silence.
Yeah.
Joy.
Right. So, Jimmy, you know, we're 19 days away from Election Day. And to my delight, you have been an outspoken critic of Trump. Misery loves company. And after his COVID diagnosis, he is now telling people he is immune and is traveling around the country doing rallies as Macho Man. What do you think about this? How are you feeling about all of this right now, about this election?
First of all, nothing tickles me more than how mad you get and how mad you are, Joy. I love it because you could just barely contain yourself. If I called you a year ago and I said, here's what I think is going to happen. Trump is going to get this very contagious disease. He's going to have it, but he's still going to go do these rallies and he's going to be touching people and breathing on people. Whatever. You'd say, no, that's a little much. You know, if we were writing this, we would have to reel it in a little bit. It is so absolutely unbelievable. It really is crazy. Yeah. And I hope that people remember how crazy it is because we've become, I think, almost totally desensitized. I mean, he could walk out naked on the White House lawn tomorrow. We'd be like, anyway, what's next?
Not that. Bleach my eyes. No.
Yeah.
Jimmy, you know, one of his I was watching one of his supporters, and she was attending the rally in Iowa, and she said, well, if it's my time to die, I'll die. I mean, what about the kids you're around? What about everybody else whose time is not to die? Maybe it's your time. There's a lot of people who it's not their time. I'll go crazy from this. I'll go crazy.
Where is God in situations like this? Where is the lightning bolt that we're expecting to come down and answer that question for all of us?
Jimmy, I have to ask you, you took this past July and August off from your show to spend time with your family. You rented an RV and drove around the country. Now, tell us what that was like with a 6 and a 3-year-old.
Well, you'd think I would rent an RV, but that's not how I work. I actually went and purchased an RV. Now I have an RV in the parking lot. I'm at the show right now. I don't live in a prison. But yes, I bought an RV, and we drove it to Idaho. And this seems to amaze people. And that's one of the things about being on television that is so interesting, is when you do anything, any normal thing that normal people do, people are just overwhelmed. They're like, wait, you drove the RV? I mean, that is incredible. Like, I put my shoes on myself and then I got in it and I steered and I did all the stuff.
Jimmy, it's an RV. It's not so normal. People drive station wagons and minivans. RVs are still a bit of an exception.
It's a 34-foot long RV, and the kids loved it. They either have bunk beds in the RV, and I kind of loved it too. I mean, there were a few moments where it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was just staring at the road, fearful that I was going to flip this thing and end the whole family in one fiery blaze. But other than that, it was delightful.
I get those questions all the time
Jimmy,
on my bus. People don't understand it.
I think it sounds cool. I think the RV sounds cool. But the news cycle, Jimmy, changes so fast, as you know, and it just seems like every day there is another Trump bombshell. Was it nice to be away from that this summer when you were off on your adventure, or did you miss being able to comment on it every day? Because I know I certainly just missed your commentary.
Well, thank you. Both of those things are true, really. I mean, on one hand, I very much enjoyed not being glued to his every movement. And that was nice. And it really was instructive. I think you realize that when you immerse yourself in all this news, it's stressful. And getting away from it is definitely good for the soul. But also, there were a couple of times, like when we found out he wanted to have his face carved into Mount Rushmore, when I really felt the urge to turn the RV around and head back to work. Because those are the kind of things that it just, you know that they're like a comedy miracle. They don't happen often.
Yeah, yeah. And so Dr. Fauci was on the Time 100 most influential list this year, and you wrote the profile on him, which I thought was very fitting. But apparently you were surprised that they asked you why.
I was. They called and asked me, and I said, how many people said no to this before you got to me? Why would you call me about this? And I really couldn't figure it out. And then they did admit that some people had said no. I think they told me Magic Johnson couldn't do it. He didn't have time to do it. And so they came to me, and I love Dr. Fauci. I think that in an administration full of ne'er-do-wells and lunatics, he is a bright light, and I was happy to write something about him because I do think he's great, and I hope I'm sure he's taking a lot of abuse, but I hope he hangs in there for all of our good.